You're listening to The Wedding Whisperer with Sarah Burton of Simply Love Studio in Lexington, Kentucky. Rentals are something that probably didn't cross your mind when you first got engaged, or even when you started the wedding planning process, but they are definitely something you need for your wedding day and something that you will need to budget for. On this episode, I chat with Ian Goff, a leader in the rental world nationwide and owner of Goff Tents and Events right here in Nicholasville, Kentucky. We talk trends, guest experience, how much to budget for rentals, and more. So I'm guessing you grew up in the rental world to start with.
Correct. 'Cause I don't think a lot of people wake up and say, you know what? I think I want to spend my life working in a rental store. So my father and mother bought a company called Straddling Party Rental in 1985. So I was 3. So literally, when they say you grew up in the business, I literally grew up in the back. And I remember there being a pile of dirty linens and like a 4-inch black and white TV that I watched He-Man on. And then I would stand on a milk crate and help run the dishwasher and all of those things. So literally, it's been part of my life for almost 40 years.
And then when did you kind of take over?
So I came on as the manager full-time at the beginning of 2004. So that's 20 years ago. My father was still very active, ran the day-to-day side of the business. And right around 2008, when the economy took a dive, I had the idea that we should transform our business. He had always had the philosophy of having large tents, lots of tables and chairs, big corporate events, all those things that went away. And I said, what if we restructure because we have all the inventory and we focused more on the wedding market? We have the items that they want, and there's definitely a need, and especially in a time when the economy was going down, people couldn't afford to go to the banquet halls and the country clubs and things of the past, and we provided a very cost-effective alternative. And that's really when my time when it became my time to run the business.
And you mentioned that your parents bought a company. At what point did you change the company name to Goff Tents?
So when they took over in 85, it was Straddling Party Rental, and they changed that and it became the Party Shop. So the Party Shop was the typical 1980s one-stop party shop. We had tents, tables and chairs, linens, china, glassware. We had costumes. And we did paper goods. So it was back in the day when you got napkins for your wedding and you would put the little blocks in and you would foil stamp them. So we did all of that. And I want to say 89, 90 is when Liquor Barn came to town. And my parents had the foresight to realize those paper goods and those disposable sale items that were such a big piece of what we were doing was going to be gone because they were such a large corporation. And also at that same time, I think my brother and I had a birthday party and we had bounce houses and a kid broke their arm. And they realized really quick, there's so much liability in this and we're not going to be able to compete in this other space. So they really kind of abandoned ship, sold off certain parts of the business, and my dad started Southeast Tents. And that was probably 90, 91. So that stayed as it was. Really, in 2004, when I came on, I kind of convinced him that I thought we should put the Goff name in front of it. And so it was Goff Southeast Tents. It's slowly working towards the eventual it becoming Goff Tents. And then from there, we went to Goff Tents and Events. So it's been a slow phase out. And you can actually still go on Google and you can either find Southeast Tents or Bob Goff Southeast Tents. So
it's always interesting in the wedding world. I feel like we have all kind of been there, like with different company names. Like you start at one point and then you kind of transition. Like mine is doing business as and all of those things because we've kind of learned and we've transitioned. And I think a lot of times when couples hear the word rentals, they don't exactly know what that means. Along with like when someone gets engaged, everything about the wedding process is new to them. They have looked at Pinterest, they have looked at Instagram, they've watched TikToks, but when it comes your turn, it's literally like your mind goes blank and you start forgetting and then you're like, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do. So when we refer to the word rentals today, wedding rentals, What is going to fall underneath that word?
A lot. So, I mean, I would tell you from an inventory perspective, we carry tents, we do tables, chairs, we do linens, lighting, staging, dance floor, china, glassware, flatware. We have all these items, but we're more than that. We're really, in my opinion, one of the most important information sources a couple can have because our sales team works on hundreds, if not thousands, of weddings every single year. So, we have a saying when we sit down with a couple, we're not selling because they have made the decision to come see us. We're telling you what our experiences have been. You want to have white linens on the table and you want to have the natural wood chair, right? That seems like a great concept. But what we're going to tell you is the natural wood chair has an ivory cushion, and an ivory cushion and a white linen might not be the look that you're going for. So, hey, let's sit down and mock up a table and let's put these things together and see how this really looks. Because sometimes what's going on in their head is not how it's going to play out in reality. And being able to offer that information and be able to educate them from our education that we've received from being able to work with so many couples over the year is one of the biggest pieces that I think as a rental company that we're able to provide to our customers.
What are some of the most popular items that you rent? Or maybe the items that you rent every single weekend for weddings?
I guess you would look at that by the department. I mean, obviously, tents have been a hugely popular alternative since the economy changed in 2008. And the different varieties that we offer, I mean, there is your traditional high peak tent, which has got the beautiful swoops and lines, and being able to accent those with string lights underneath. We introduced the clear tent line, so probably around 2012 or 13. So we carry that in multiple different styles, and being able to have the ability to be inside of a tent and protected from the weather, but still being able to have the natural elements, I think has been something that's been very popular in this central Kentucky market. We went from there into the sailcloth tent. That's a popular trend all over the country. Maybe not caught on as much here, but it is. And now we're even trying to do some different things. We actually have a clear tent with black trim. It's got the black cover. So just being able to have those color accent pieces available in the tent. And then you go to, the lighting underneath the tabletop. The farm table obviously has been a very popular look here. That rustic, outside, natural Kentucky elements, being able to incorporate those into a wedding, I think is a signature piece. Obviously, the bourbon barrel craze kind of seems to be sliding back. Then you would get into linen. I think textures, patterns, we went through the geometrics and the patterns and stuff, but I feel like textures, I think the sensory touch on the tabletop is something that we're seeing people really want to
I
incorporate.
literally pet the velvet napkins on the way in the door today. I'm that person. I have to touch everything.
Being able to touch and have it, and even the carousel goblets, just to have that texture and that heavier feel. And the same thing in flatware. For a long time, it's just been kind of the simple chateau, but being able to elevate that into a heavier piece and just the hand feel. I think people really like to feel, touch, see something different, even if it is in the same color wheel that we've seen in traditional weddings for years and years and years. It's just those little unique nuances that make it special to them.
And when we reference flatware, we are referencing spoons, knives, forks, those kind of things. Just to put that in there because I know sometimes I have brain farts and I'm like, what are they talking about? So
I still struggle to set a table sometimes, so I won't.
as far as chairs, you have 7 or 8 different kinds, or maybe even more than that
Probably
now?
more than that now.
Okay.
I mean, we've got gold, silver, mahogany, chivaris, which of course is that bamboo style chair and very elegant. And you can get different colored cushions you can pair with that. Garden chairs, you've got your traditional white, we've got black, we've got natural wood, we've got the fruit wood, we've got the crossback chair, and then even just your traditional white plastic folding chair. I'm probably forgetting some along the way. Benches, we've got a couple different styles of benches. So there's a lot of different options that allows a couple to tailor the look to what they're seeing, that Pinterest storyboard that they have in their head.
Do you think that the white garden chairs are the most popular?
Yes, far and away. They're economical to begin with. They're timeless. And so many times when we're talking with couples and they have these ideas of certain colors, we say, let's try to find a way to accent that, because in 20 years, you don't want to look back at your wedding photo and be the one that had neon pink linens on your table. And I've had that conversation. That's a real conversation that I had before with a couple.
And then we kind of started that whole thing about popular items with tents. I want to circle back to that. Whenever we were doing company history of Goff, we failed the part where you started manufacturing tents. We left that part out. Talk to me about how that happens. You actually make the tents that you rent to couples.
Correct. Yes, we do. So when we sold off all the other sides of the business and really my father decided that we were going to focus on what was Southeast Tents. Tenting is very seasonal in Kentucky. I mean, obviously when you get much past October, and even really at that time, I can remember the end of September, first week of October was the end of our season. So you had to have something to do for October through April, a way to survive, basically. And so that's where he got into the idea that we were going to manufacture tents. So we did start manufacturing. We also do repair for other people's stuff. So there's other companies around the country that send their stuff in. But really, it was just a means to generate revenue in the off season so we could keep pushing forward. And now it's grown into a sizable portion of our corporation.
Let's go ahead and transition here into 2020. I feel like I have to I always talk about like the guest on the podcast and why I have asked them to be on the podcast. And the reason that I have asked you to be on the podcast today is because you literally live, eat, and breathe rentals. You are the go-to rental guy here in Lexington, and that is because you not only own Goff Tents and Events. In early to mid 2020, when this little thing called the pandemic happened, you actually acquired another rental company that had been in the area for now 50 years. Talk to me a little bit about making that decision.
Yeah, 2020 was definitely one of the most giving years of my life. I mean, to start with a pandemic that disallows social interaction when you live in a business that functions on social interaction, that was a life-changing moment. I can remember being in my car the day that Kentucky hit 100 cases and thinking, oh my gosh, this is real. And then driving to Harrodsburg to bid on a $300 job because we were looking for any work we can, and having $50,000 in cancellations and refunds that I had to issue. They gave me this beautiful thing called silent reflux. It's where I don't have heartburn, but I have reflux, and I thought I had laryngitis for a year. It was wonderful. But during all that, yes, the Purdon family had become good friends of ours. Sam and I were really close. They were actually processing linen for us. And I was coming over one day when they were shut down, but he was still processing for me. And he said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something. Would you, like to buy us? Never really thought about doing an acquisition before. I mean, we were very focused on what we were doing on our side and pushing that brand and figuring out how to grow our business. And Goff and Purdon, although we did a lot of the same thing, were very different businesses. At Goff, we were focused on end user, fair and festival, backyard type things. And Purdon was definitely more into the caterers, planners, venues. Their client base was different. So it was a really nice marriage of, we were tent heavy, they were tabletop heavy, and being able to put those two brands together and streamline the processes and grow our sales team, because really they were shut down when this happened. And there was only 2 employees that came over, the lady that ran the linen department and the guy that ran the dish department. He's actually still with us today. So there was no staff. There was no, anything. It was kind of just start from scratch and figure it out. And we were lucky that they had a tremendous name in the community and been doing things at that point, well, for almost 45 years and 50 years as of this year. So yeah, we were able to navigate the acquisition and it went very well. And they were a great family to work with. Very grateful for the opportunity they were given. And I still talk to them from time to time. I mean, they're great people. So very appreciative.
So we have Goff Tents and Events, which is located in Nicholasville.
Correct.
We have Purdon Rentals, which is located close to Home Goods in Lexington. I feel like everybody listening knows exactly where Home Goods is at. So about a mile from there. And then most recently in 2022, you also acquired Mr. Lennon.
Correct.
And Mr. Lennon may not be as well known, maybe amongst couples that are getting married, because it's not as heavily focused on weddings per se. But if you'll just tell us a little bit about Mr. Lennon.
Right. So Mr. Lennon is more of an industrial laundry, but it had a great facility that had great potential. And we've really been able to unlock that. That just allowed us to have a huge product offering because they're processing not only linen and napkins, but we work with hospitals, healthcare facilities, restaurants, massage studios. So, I mean, there's just a huge client base, which means there's a lot of machines, there's a lot of equipment, there's a lot of ability to quickly turn and process, which means we can have more offerings available. So, what it's really been able to unlock for our wedding side of it is, most rental companies might have a couple thousand pieces of linen total. I mean, you've been there. There's probably close to 1 million pieces there. And that's not a joke when I say that. I mean, there is so many potential offerings that we have. And it also means we're working with other distributors at such a high volume that if we need something special or specific for a client, we're able to get that a little bit easier than if you're just a small one-stop rental store.
And literally every single napkin that goes out of the door through any of the three companies, every single one gets individually sent through the press. Like I just stood there and watched them. I'm like, you do that for every single one of those, and it goes through and it comes back and it goes through and it comes back. And I'm like, I can't imagine how long it takes to actually do that. And you run like 2 shifts there, don't you, all day?
Over 145,000 napkins a week. So we do run 2 shifts, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. Saturday and Sunday, we run 7 to 3 in a second shift by necessity.
That is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. So I know that those listening, it probably is to them as well. And two, like we walk into restaurants here and we don't think about the napkins. We don't think about, do they wash those in-house, or where do the napkins come from? We just walk in, we use the napkin. But there are so many places that you walk into in Lexington and Louisville that Mr. Lennon is the one that provides all the napkins for them.
Correct. Yes, we're very fortunate to work with some great restaurants. We have some great partnerships with hotels and restaurants throughout this area, even down into Somerset. Just some wonderful partners that we have that have really allowed us to grow that side of the business. And of course, as that's grown, it's provided more opportunities to every aspect. And that's always been what we've tried to do as we've grown the business, is every piece that's been added on is something that's going to help the whole overall corporation. The fact that we can manufacture a tent at Goff means a Purdon customer can have a custom piece that they might not have been able to have otherwise. That a Mr. Lennon processed napkin can be turned in a day to be back out to a bride who needs something last second. Oh my gosh, we forgot we need 250 pieces. Not a lot of places can turn that same day. So it offers so many more possibilities to our customers.
And for the listeners, they know that I talk about almost every episode. Like there are things that are super important to me that maybe is weird to normal people. But one of those is the linens and how they look on a table. Whenever I'm meeting with couples, one of the first things, if it's a brand new couple and they're going through the ways that they want to save money, a lot of times they will mention that they want to just order their linens off Amazon, or they want to just get them off Facebook Marketplace. And it depends on the bride and it depends on the conversation we're having. But I typically try to kind of educate them and at least give them the options and give them the knowledge to why that's maybe not always the best decision. And I want to start with, if you're ordering them from Amazon, they are typically going to come in a small box. They are going to most likely be folded in a rectangle package.
Size of a napkin.
Yes. And so whenever you open that, it has about 4 million wrinkles and creases on it. Anytime that you order something like that, I would also recommend that you launder it before you put it on your table that your guests are going to eat on. But even if you're not laundering it, you still can't put it on the table with all of those creases. You didn't spend $100 for that centerpiece to put it on a wrinkly tablecloth.
100%. And I can't tell you how many times that we go into venues or to weddings that we're doing, and the couple bought their linens online. And inevitably, it is the mother of the bride or the mother of the groom that is out there with the steamer trying to get those wrinkles out, yelling, screaming, saying all kinds of not nice things. But yes, so if you, let's just say a basic white polyester linen is $20 to rent. You can buy that online for $12, maybe $15. If you're going to send it off and have it processed, you're going to send it to a dry cleaner, which, little known secret, to actually send it to Mr. Linen to get done. So the dry cleaners don't actually do them. You're probably going to spend $9 to $10. So now you're at $22. Then when you get done with the event, to be able to do anything with those linens again, you're going to send them again to the dry cleaners and spend another $10. So now you spent an additional $12. Or if you go the route of steaming them yourself, somebody has to commit their time. And I always try to stress this to people, to my wife, to my children. You have to place a value per hour on your time, because the time that you're spent doing something is time that you can't be doing something else. So if I'm having to steam a linen, that is time that the mother of the bride is not spending with her daughter getting ready for the biggest day of their life. So people have to take that into account. So it does seem like there's some savings up front, but at the end of the day, there's a greater cost than there is savings.
And two, after the wedding, whenever you have rented them, they will go back into a linen bag and probably picked up by the rental company, or you can even have those dropped off. But if you did those yourself, those are going to be pulled from the table. They're probably going to have some water on them. They're probably going to have some red wine on them. They're going to sit in a bag for a couple days because your mom's not going to go home and wash them immediately. You're going on a honeymoon. And then whenever you come back and 6 weeks later, it's time to wash the linens, they're going to be molded, and you can't do anything about it. And so then you can't turn around and resell them at that point.
Right. It just puts more burden on the couple to do that way, or somebody else. And, if people rent linens from us, we ask that you leave them on the table, because that gives them, for us, it gives them time to air dry. So once you put those on the table, we typically don't put them on because we're there 2 to 3 days beforehand. And obviously birds, bugs, things, you don't want those getting on your linen. But you walk away and it's done. There's nothing, no extra work for you to do after the fact. It's all just walk away and go enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll take care of it.
I see now more than ever, whenever vendors and couples are tagging their vendors on their wedding photos on social media, that they will have 2 to 3 to 4 rental companies tagged. And while I get that, it's also making their life more difficult, because when they work with you, you have 95% of everything that they're going to need. So walk me through the benefits of using one rental company versus using multiple, especially if they're having a tent.
Right. And I do understand that sometimes there are specialty pieces
Absolutely.
that certain vendors just excel at doing it above all else. And we refer those vendors. I mean, for example, Nadia.
Yeah.
There's a certain type of lighting that she does in ceilings and that type of decor. It is insanely tedious, and I don't want to do it. We don't do it well, but she's tremendous at it. And so we always encourage people, if they want that look, this is the vendor that you want to utilize. But if you're not going to have a coordinator, and I'm not talking about a day of coordinator, if you're not going to have a full on coordinator, it becomes very difficult for a couple to coordinate, because, or let's just say I'm doing the dress out underneath and somebody else is doing the tent. If you haven't told me when the tent is coming and we show up, and we do see this several times, somebody will have the tent, somebody will have the dress out. We're there to do one thing and the other thing's not done. People wind up waiting, and all of our crews are scheduled to be somewhere else. So now it might be 5, 6 o'clock the evening of your wedding rehearsal, and we haven't got to put the dance floor together, or the tables and chairs and things, because those things weren't scheduled. So being able to streamline the process is going to take so much burden off of the couple, knowing that we're going to get in advance with you and say, okay, we're going to be here on Thursday. We're going to be there between 8 and 12. We're going to set the tent up. once the tent's up, if they have decorating they want to do underneath, they can start that while we're doing the tables and chairs. We're putting together the dance floor. We're there with them. They're going to have one crew leader that they're going to be able to talk to and say, hey, I don't really love the dance floor there. What if we kind of did this? Or we need to pull the stage 2 feet out to give the band space. If you've got 3, 4, 5 different vendors doing that, there's no way to really coordinate that with the account. Again, taking a whole lot of time away from the things that you can be doing. Because on the day of your wedding rehearsal or the day before, I guarantee you there's a lot more important things to do than sit there and work with 5 or 6 different people about where this goes or where that goes.
And two, especially even not during just setup, but even pickup. If the tent company is coming on Monday to pick up the tent, but the tables and chairs aren't getting picked up until Tuesday, and it rains overnight,
then you become responsible. If
Exactly.
the other company takes those items and sets them outside and they're damaged, the couple becomes responsible for that. And we had that happen. We had another company came, they took a sound system out, left it outside, and it rained. That was an expensive mistake that could have been prohibited by just having one vendor taking care of all that, or a way to communicate that. And that's just something that the couple doesn't know about. And again, in the consultation process, they were never told of the worst case scenario. And I think sometimes people feel scared when we tell them that, but we do always try to outline the worst case scenario, because you need to know why doing things a certain way is to your benefit. It's not because we don't want to do things exactly the way that you want them. We want to make sure that you get the end result that you desire.
And I did want to talk about a couple of our really good tent venues here in Lexington, because I know that couples see clear tents, clear top tents online. They see the sailcloth and they are sold on that before they even start looking at venues. So if you don't have a home or a farm to put those on, I made a list of a couple of venues, so I'm sure that you can add to that. The first one that came to mind was the Thoroughbred Center on Paris Pike. They got a whole new remodel now, probably 7 or 8 years ago, and they have an incredible tent spot. They've got all the bathrooms, they've got parking, they have a bar there. There is a backup plan if it were to get crazy weather or anything like that. I love the Majestic tent that Purdon's originally had to start with. That is literally my favorite tent. Waveland Historic Site is one of my favorite ones. It is at Man o' War and Nicholasville Road. You have probably heard of it or even been there for photos over the years. I think it is a very underutilized venue.
Maybe the most. And one of the things about Waveland that makes it very unique is not only do they have multiple places where you can have a tent, but they have bathrooms there, they have electric, and they have parking. And it's very difficult to find a place that has all 3 of those provided. There's a lot of tremendous venues in this area, but to find all 3 of those to be included at a reasonable price point is very rare.
There's also the Loudon House downtown. I don't know if you still do many there, but I do think it has great options.
It does, and it has a lot of character. The fact that it is in downtown and has that rich history about it, there's just something special about those downtown venues that are very unique, very old Lexington.
I know you do a ton at the Barn at Springhouse Gardens in Nicholasville. I feel like you're there probably every weekend. Glen Larry, which is out in Paris. I have not seen as many there recently, but I think it's a great spot. Spindletop, a lot of people actually put tents out in the back behind Spindletop. We had one in the Bridal Bliss magazine several years ago. It was the clear top and it was just absolutely beautiful. Saxony. And then there's a historic place that is associated with Waveland in Richmond. Are there any other ones you can think of off the top of your head that you go to?
Whitehall.
Whitehall, yes.
Yes, Whitehall's another wonderful one. You know, there's so many of them, and they all have their own unique elements that make them great. But I also love doing a tent in someone's backyard. I think there's something special about the connection that people have to certain places, to a home, to a family member's home, to the farm, to those special places to them that really can add character and make a wedding unique and special to them.
And if somebody is interested in doing it at their home or on a farm, and there's never been a tent on that property before, is that something that you can help them with and help them figure out like what size and what kind and what the process is?
Right. So, I mean, we always start with some basic questions just to understand how many guests they're wanting to have, and then getting a basic idea of what they are visualizing being underneath. Are you having a band? Are you having a DJ? Are you having a buffet? Are you having a plated meal? And then we can actually go online and we can do some aerial Google Earth shots just to get some basic ideas. And from there, we can schedule a site survey where we will actually have somebody come out, go through the area, say, hey, it's going to work here. It's not going to work here. If you want to do it in this space, we might need to trim some branches. We've got a power line here. Try to get a basic idea if we think there might be any underground utilities, which as we move closer to, we wanted to call 811 just for safety's sake to make sure that there's nothing underground. But yeah, I mean, there's always ways to walk people through that process and say, this can happen here. This can happen here. Now, what do you like best?
And then whenever they do something like that, do you also have generators and things like that you can rent for them and help them with all the electricity and stuff?
So we carry some smaller power enough. We can run bands. We can do, your basic stuff. Once people start getting into, let's say, above 300 guests, and they're going to have a band, if they want to do a plated meal, which means the caterer is going to require more power, then we start referring them to some vendors that carry some larger. You want to have that single whisper pull behind instead of having 2, 3, 4 generators. That's when you start running into power questions. And I'm a terrible electrician. I've actually electrocuted myself, I think, like 6 times. No joke, 3 times in a row one time before I figured out the light switch was turned on. So I do have a limited, I see you laughing at it, but this is 100% true. I told you I'd tell you the truth. But yeah, you get to a point where if you can't have it to a few small units, you want to go to one larger one just to have a central space to be able to run a spider box off and be able to keep everything sectioned off appropriately.
And I will say, I want to circle back to that, but in those situations, that is 100% the time that you should have a veteran wedding planner because they have been there, they've done that, they've made the mistakes, and they know now what not to do and what to do, who to call, how to make things happen, because there are so many logistics that go into that. Even just talking about navigating multiple rental companies. If you're bringing in a larger generator, you're bringing in bathrooms, you've got to coordinate all of that. Would you agree that that is a recommendation that you would have?
100%. Because if you're at the scale that you're having to bring in power and you don't bring the power in until after all your rentals are dropped off, none of them get tested. And one of the worst things, and I have seen this happen, is the restroom trailer didn't get tested because there was no power and it didn't work. And it was in July. So you can only imagine how, that situation played out. So it is, when you get above a certain guest list count, it's almost imperative that you bring in someone that knows what they're doing. And I know it can be expensive, but the payoff is so well worth it just to have someone who knows what's going on, is going to be able to take care of situations. I can't tell you how many times, 99.9% of weddings, something goes wrong. And if you have a planner that knows what they're doing, the bride and groom might know, but the guests never know what's going on. They just think it's part of the show.
Exactly.
And how it's played off, and the ability just to have somebody roll with the punches, take care of it like it never even happened. And it just makes the whole night go so much smoother. Going back to Waveland, the train schedule there, there's a train that actively goes through there. And if you haven't paid attention to that, that train's going to go off right in the middle of your ceremony. So having somebody that knows that, they're either going to incorporate that in or say, hey, guess what? We might want to do this ceremony at 5:30 instead of this because this is what's going to happen.
And another new term that we are probably going to introduce to a lot of couples today is a cook's tent. Give me a 1-sentence definition of a cook's tent.
Place where the caterer prepares the cuisine for the event.
There you go. Perfect. So anytime that you are, especially at a farm, or even if you are doing like a backyard wedding or it's too far away from the kitchen or the kitchen is too small at the property, you absolutely have to bring in a cook's tent. And even at Castle and Key, you have to bring in a cook's tent. So there are a lot of venues, Springhouse Gardens, you typically bring in one there. So what will typically go underneath a cook's tent?
So it's typically going to be somewhere between a 20 by 20 and a 20 by 30, depending on how many guests. We're going to have 6 to 8 tables, some lighting, and some walls so the guests can't see what's going on. But that's where they're going to have ovens. They're going to have warmers if they're using fryers, things like that. It's going to be where they prepare and do the plating if it's a served meal. So they're going to be able to plate those meals, and then we're going to have a setup where they're going to be able to enter directly into the tent to serve the guests. It's just a nice way, especially if there is a walk, if there's going to be inclement weather. That way, the staff is going to be able to prepare a meal and deliver it quickly, safely, and without getting rained on to the guests.
This is something you may not be able to give me, but I feel like you know numbers well enough that you probably can. Is there an average amount that you say that your couple spend on a cook's tent?
On a cook's tent, depending on what type of equipment might go underneath there, and that's going to depend on your caterer and the meal that you pick. Let's say it's going to go anywhere between $500 and $1,500.
Okay.
If they have to bring in ovens and propane in, then you might have to have a generator and things like that. So it's not that high of a cost if you consider what they might be able to do, having a 4-course meal prepared in a tent and served to a couple.
And it makes the difference in the quality of your food.
100%.
Yeah.
If they're making most of the food in another kitchen and then bringing it to the site to serve, the quality will be nowhere near as good as if they're able to prepare it on site.
And then when it comes to like the cook's tent and the dishware, the flatware, all of those things, is that something you recommend that the couple orders, or would you recommend that like the planner and the caterer work together on that?
That can go a lot of different ways. And I think that depends on the couple and what portion of the planning they're handling versus their planner. I think it's important that there is a conversation where we're either sitting down with the couple and the coordinator, the couple and the caterer, and whoever's going to be that person that makes that decision, because let's just say we have 2 different gold flatwares. The couple says they like gold. Well, there's the Phoenix, which is a much more contemporary piece versus a more traditional gold. So you want them to have an opinion and be present in the planning of it. But sometimes it's better for that final decision, the execution, to be made between the rental company and the planner, especially because, like we've talked about before, they're going to say we have 200 guests, so we need 200 forks. Well, we know that 200 is not going to be the appropriate number because either A, Uncle Johnny did an RSVP and he shows up, or B, little Billy drops his fork on the ground and it's dirty and you're going to need an extra one. So knowing that you need to have those few extra pieces, and I know everybody's going to think of it in a budget conscious world, well, we don't need 10 extra forks. Really you do, and we're talking about $5 to $10. So, they're thinking about how to save money, and from the planner and the rental perspective, we're thinking about how to execute the event to the highest level.
You talked about the forks and needing more forks, but one of the areas that you really need extra is when it comes to your bar and your glassware. I was talking to a caterer a couple weeks ago, and they had an event for, I think it was like 270 people, and they had 2,000 pieces of glassware, and they actually ended up having to wash them on site because they went through all of that. And that's something I don't think couples really realize, because if you have water, you have tea, then you have the entire bar, how quickly those go through.
Absolutely, especially if you are having bar service where they are taking cleaning the pieces off the table and then turning them and be able to do that. So when you get above a certain number, that is definitely where you want to be with your caterer or whoever's doing your bar service to talk about, hey, we're going to have X number of guests. We want to have a bourbon, a clear drink, a wine, or whatever you're going to be able to serve, and then talk about what those needs are going to look like, because it can vary drastically based on a signature cocktail versus wine and beer. So definitely, anytime you have the availability to work with your resources, to work with your caterer, your planner, those people, they're going to give you knowledge that you just don't think to ask. Just, I don't know anything about the restaurant world. I wouldn't know how to order food for a restaurant. So if I was there, somebody's going to have to teach you, again, allowing the people that you're hiring to offer their knowledge to make sure the execution is to get to the end goal.
And I want to talk a little bit about plates today. I always say this on every podcast. I'm so passionate about things. Plates are one of those things. I know a lot of times when couples get engaged, they want to go to the peddler's mall. Mom wants to go to the peddler's mall. They want to do mismatched china and have that look. A lot of times that's really fun in the beginning. That's really fun for about 2 months. And then you're over it after that. Well, if you're wanting to do those plates preset on the table so that it has that look, that means every single spot needs to have a plate. You can't just, I'm tired of buying plates. Your guests have to have a plate, or you have to have it there for looks, essentially. And you're going to have extra in case they get broken in transporting, if they get broken when they're being set up, that kind of thing.
And not just a dinner plate. What if you're going to have a salad? What if you're going to have a dessert? Things like that. What if somebody wants seconds? There's so many things to consider when you're talking about your plates and what you're going to have.
And the other thing I want to talk about, when you're buying your own plates, all of these have to be washed. Whenever a rental company washes the plates, is that the same as using like a dishwasher in your home to wash the plates?
No. So the dishwashers that we use are set to 185 degrees, which is the temperature that achieves the sanitation level that you would need. So, that's another reason that you want to rent your glasses, your plates, forks, knives, and spoons, as opposed to buy them, especially if you're buying plastic. You don't know if those have been sanitized. You don't know how they were handled in the factory. You don't know whose hands touched them. We have one person that goes through, washes, hand polishes, places them in a rack. They're bagged and sealed. So it's ensured cleanliness and quality every single time. We can stand behind that. And that's definitely one of the hallmarks and the staples of our dish department is the cleanliness, the sanitation, and the extra levels that we go to make sure that there's not a spot on a water glass, that every fork that you grab, is clean, and you're not seeing a chunk left behind, or it came out of a factory and you don't know if the orchid man had been there or not. So,
and two, once all of your guests have eaten, those plates have to be scraped off or cleaned again. Ideally, your caterer would be the one that would do that. But if it's kind of like a DIY situation, how are plates to be returned to a rental company?
we asked it, it's scraped of debris. We don't want to get your chicken leg back. I'm sure the cheddar biscuits were delicious, but 2 days later, they're not going to be any good. So, we asked if there is a water available that they can be gently rinsed, but we understand there's going to be some situations where it's just not available, as opposed to a situation where if it's your own, however long it kind of goes back to the linen conversation. Sometimes those plates don't get washed. They sit in the garage for 2 weeks.
In a tub, and you also don't want mom going home that night having to take care of it.
Absolutely. Again, you're asking somebody else to take on the burden of having to scrape these plates, to wash them, clean them, repackage them, and then try to sell them. How much extra did you spend, as opposed to it's less than $1 for a plate that is brought to you, cleaned, taken back, and it's gone. You never have to worry about it again.
So how much are most of the plates then?
They're going to vary. You've got everything from, especially if you're in the smaller plates, 50 cents to $1 or less. So, and that depends if you want a scalloped, if you want a white, if you want a majestic band, platinum band, gold on ivory. So many different options available. That's why we don't have any packages. Everything that we do is a-la-carte. Because if a bride is just dead set that she wants a gold rim plate and silver flatware, go for it. We will, there's no rules. It's always right if that's what you really want. Again, we're going to guide you as best that we can, but we don't just lump things together and say, you get this fork and this charger and this. Because I understand, again, it goes back to the look and the feel and the touch, and people want to have that blended. They've got an idea in their mind, and I haven't been cool and creative in a long time, and I understand things have changed because I grew up in a world where, you didn't wear navy and black or black and brown together. And I was so happy when that became accessible because now I can just wear one belt all the time.
Let's talk a little bit about delivery, setup, and then pickup options. Let's talk about it if they have a tent, or look at it from the perspective if they're just getting like tables, linens, chairs for a venue.
So obviously, if we are doing a tent's going to be the first thing. And we offer then the option with tables and chairs for drop off, where the customer will set them up and break them down. or we set them up and we break them down. We can set them up. So it can be done anyway. Typically, we're going to recommend that you allow our staff to do it. Not only does that mean you don't have to do the work, we have a tremendous warehouse team that's checking through all the product, but it also allows us that one additional check to make sure that, hey, when this came off the truck, you got a little dirt on this, or things can happen. It's just one more check on our end that's going to ensure when the bride and groom show up, when the mother or the bride, the father, whoever it is, it's done for them. You take as much work off their plate so they're able to walk in and enjoy, because that's the most important thing.
When it comes to those things, what type of fees are involved? If you're like within Lexington or like surrounding areas, how do you determine when you're delivering and when you're picking up?
So on the fee structure, we just charge by the mile. It's just X amount per mile, because that's the travel cost involved. If it's bigger or smaller, that doesn't change. It just helps us offset the fuel costs. When it's going to be can be determined, on the needs of the customer and the size. Obviously, if it's going to be somebody that's going to have multiple tents, we're going to be in a 400 to 500 person guest list. That's going to require a day, maybe 2 days, especially if it's a little further away. So we might say, hey, we'd like to come in and do this on Wednesday and Thursday. That way they have Friday if they want to do any decorating or anything underneath. And it just gives a little bit more time. And we might even say, hey, we'll come back on Sunday and start the strike. That way we can get tables and chairs out of the way, because maybe they've got hanging fixtures that they've put in the tent thing. So again, if they've got a planner, we try to coordinate that with them to make sure that we can actually make it easier on them to get the other things out of the way and just work around the schedule. Because a lot of times we're doing it on a working farm. So maybe it needs to be a Thursday setup and a Sunday strike, because come Monday morning, they need to be able to get back to work. So there's so many things that are unique to each situation, and we want to make sure that we can respect every client's needs.
Ian, I have so many more questions for you about rentals, because it really is such a broad topic and can be a very expensive part of the wedding. I feel like we've done a great job today with the basics, but there's still more I want to cover. And I want to talk about the infamous damage waiver. Does a couple really need to purchase that or not? And I want to touch on guest experience and how important that is. Join me in 2 weeks to hear the final recap of my conversation with Ian Goff with Goff Tents and Events.
For more information about Simply Love Studio or to schedule your wedding consultation, go to simplylovestudio.com.